Good evening. Welcome everyone to the meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Simon Bloxham, Alistair Willoughby, Sean Nolan. Having been given due notice, Councillor Michael Muir has been advised he'll be substituting for Councillor Simon Bloxham. Councillor Nigel Mason will be substituting for Councillor Sean Nolan, and Councillor Amy Allen will be substituting for Councillor Alistair Willoughby. Yes. We have just received apologies from Councillor David Levitt and Councillor Terry Tyler. Any other apologies for absence? Thank you. Item 2, minutes of 15th of September 2022. I propose we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting on the 15th of September 2022. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Tyson, for seconding. Can I have the vote, please, Abby?
Chair, this motion is carried.
Councillor Tony Hunter, I've got your name up. Was that a mistake? Fair enough. Item 3, notification of any other business. There is none. Item 4, Chair's announcements. Audio recording. In accordance with the council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recording via the NHC YouTube channel. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declaration of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights set out on the Chair's announcements on the agenda. To clarify matters for the registered speakers, members of the public have 5 minutes for each group of speakers, i.e. 5 minutes for objectors and 5 minutes for supporters. This 5-minute time limit also applies to member advocates. A warning will be given at 4.5 minutes to alert you that you have 30 seconds left. At 5 minutes, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and the speaker will cease. I will aim to have a comfort break at a suitable point in the proceedings. Public participation. Can I confirm that the 8 registered speakers are in attendance? Councillor Gerald Morris. Reed Parish Councillor Ken Langley.
Yes.
Mark Whitby. David Lazenby. Kate Sargent. Councillor Sam North. Claire Graham. And Councillor Lisa Nash. So we don't have Councillor Sam North. Okay, let's get on with business then. We start with item 6, which is 22/00910, land between Bushwood and Rokey Wood, High Street, Reed, Hertfordshire. It's to do with the retention of 5,500 cubic metres of inert soils for an engineering operation to create an agricultural reservoir. Anne MacDonald to present, please.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I have 3 updates on this item. These are: number 1, Councillor Hill has written in support of the objections and set out by Councillor Morris in the report. The second one is that following the publication of the report, Councillor Morris submitted some additional queries regarding the possible 20 cubic metres abstraction of water. These were put to the agent and a response was received dated the 11th of October, which has been emailed around to you all and is tabled. This response also provided drainage plans, which will be displayed in the presentation when I get to that part. And also it's asked for an update to paragraph 4.3.6 of the committee report. And it asked for the last sentence of that paragraph in the information provided by the agent to read that water would be pumped through mobile irrigation equipment to use on the surrounding agricultural land. The third update is that Councillor Tyson also submitted 6 queries following the publication of the committee report. A response was received by the agent and these were emailed around earlier today. And the fourth update is that I've actually amended the description of development. So the description of development on the publicised application and on the committee report states retention of 5,500 cubic metres of soils for an engineering operation to create an agricultural reservoir. I have changed this to retention of 11,936 cubic metres of soil to create an agricultural reservoir with a capacity of 5,500 cubic metres. The agent has confirmed agreement of that amended description. So this is a full application seeking the retention of soil that has been previously imported on the site and for the soil to be regraded and for an agricultural reservoir to be created. The reservoir is to be filled primarily by rainwater and surface runoff and is to be used to water both existing crops and proposed market garden type crops. Can I have the first slide, please? Next slide, please. Thank you. The location of the reservoir is in an area of open countryside between Bush and Roky Wood, north of the solar arrays. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the site. It's the sort of central area, obviously between the two sections of wood. And it's obviously a little bit old. This aerial photograph was taken at a time when the soils had been imported before it had been sort of grown over. Next slide, please. So this shows a sort of datum point plan or a levels plan showing the position of the previously imported material, which forms a rough U shape on the land. As set out in the planning history previously, the importation of soil and the creation of a reservoir was considered to be permitted development. However, due to that reservoir size not being able to be filled, the works were no longer considered to be a viable project or to be agricultural permitted development. Next slide, please. So this application is proposing the regrading of the land to form a reservoir, which is located in the northern part of the site. The banks are to be a maximum of 4 to 5 metres high and the reservoir is to hold 5,500 cubic metres. The remaining soil is to graduate down to the farm track ground level on the south side. The sides of the banks are to be planted with wildflower mix and a landscaping condition for any additional tree planting and or fencing is recommended. Next slide, please. So there's concern locally about how viable it is the reservoir to be filled and will the filling of the reservoir result in harm to water levels remaining in the catchment area? And will this have harm on the water levels in the local ponds and streams? This is a matter the Environment Agency who raised no objection to the application. This plan and the next plan shows the existing drainage routes set out on the farm. It's for sort of forming a network. The supporting, can I show the next slide as well, please? And that's a sort of another drainage plan. The supporting information for the application sets out that the rainwater collected from the roofs of the farm buildings at New Farm Farmyard are to primarily fill the reservoir along with runoff from the fields, which will be sort of collected through these drainage ditches. With regards to abstraction, the reply from the agent dated 11th of October, an email to councillors today, states that if abstraction is necessary to fill the reservoir, this would not and cannot exceed more than 20 cubic metres per day. Therefore, it's not proposed to apply for an Environment Agency licence. The mobile drainage system will monitor the amount of water that's extracted. Next slide, please. I actually might need to click through these quite quickly. These are just various shots of the site now. So next slide, please. That's from the south side looking north. Next slide, please. Again, that's at the south side looking towards Roky Wood. Next slide, please. That's looking northwards from sort of halfway up. Next slide, please. Again, and next slide, please. Next, that's at the top now looking south. Next slide, please. That's looking down from this north side. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So these just wanted to show that the land's how the land is now. There's no planning objection to the proposed reservoir as it is development to support agriculture, which is in accordance with national and local planning policies. The resulting works are not considered to be harmful to the locality. It is noticed there is concern regarding the water levels in the area. However, the application does not propose to abstract, and in the event that it is necessary, it will be below the threshold where a licence is required, and the Environment Agency have raised no objection. The application is therefore recommended for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions from members? Councillor Tyson?
Yeah, and in the photographs of what it looks like at the moment, do they represent what it would look like if it was finally completed?
No, they're not. No, those banks aren't 4 to 5 metres high, and they're closer to the footpath. So it's sort of, I've described it a bit more detail in the committee report, but the banks will be a maximum of 4 to 5 metres high, but they're banking the high point of them is sort of 16 to 20 metres in from the farm track running up the west side and from the farm track on the northern side. So the high point is adjacent to the footpath. It's kind of going to be moved in a way. So what's on site now, my understanding is it will be substantially regraded and moved around.
Thank you.
I have one more. Could I just follow that up? As you mentioned the footpath, one of the things that I remember from the supporting documentation was that the applicant was saying that when it was all landscaped and grown in and everything, it would be an attractive feature. Is there actually a footpath there that would enable the public to enjoy that attraction?
The application's red line site is not over a footpath. The footpaths aren't affected. So there's existing farm tracks or footpaths around 3 sides of the application site, which are outside of the red line area of works. So they will not be affected by the works. And obviously they might be affected in the short term in terms of vehicle movements around that area. But in the long term, there's no proposal to build over the footpaths.
But ultimately there would be a view of it for the public.
Yes, the public will see it, and I set that out in the report that obviously the public will clearly see a grassy hill up to 4 to 5 metres in a high ground level, but the high point is set between 16 to 20 metres off the footpaths at the closest points.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michael Muir.
Thank you. Soil being moved around the county and imported has to go through the Development Control Committee at county. They would have put various conditions on that. Can I ask were all those conditions fulfilled?
The soil on the land now?
Yes, was it the right amount? Have they imported too much? There'd be various conditions on the Development Control Committee passing that.
My understanding is that the amount of soil on the land is that figure I first mentioned, the 11,936 cubic metres. From reading the documentation submitted, they've assessed how much imported material there is on the land, and that is the amount they say there is, which they say is sufficient to regrade for this purpose of this application, that no additional material needs to be brought onto the site. In terms of the checks it went through at that point in time, I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
Any other questions from members? No. Thank you, Anne. Can we now have our first registered speaker, Objector Kate Sargent, please? Sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Yes. Sorry, let me get it on the right page. Can I please have the objector read Parish Councillor Ken Langley? I do apologise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak as Chair of Reed Parish Council, and I'm authorised to do so here on behalf of both Reed and Barkway Parish Councils. The application proposes to build a reservoir and would fill it by various means, including catchment from the roof of a grain barn. The barn is half a mile away from the site. Presumably then an extensive network of pipes and pumps will be needed. These are not described. We await the drainage plan. So to date, the application is not presenting you with a complete picture of the impact of this project on the environment. We're also concerned about the negative effect of supplying the reservoir with even the 20 cubic metres of daily water abstraction allowed without a licence. We worry this will affect natural water courses between Reed and Barkway. Councillor Morris will say more about this. However, our main objection to this application is this. You're being asked to approve the retention of a large amount of inert material dumped on a beautiful landscape between 2 ancient woodlands. Exactly how much material has been deposited has been open to question. The application technically asked for 5,500 cubic meters, but prompted by your case officer, the applicant's agent has told us that 11,900 cubic meters are needed and that all this material is already on site, miraculously and precisely the right amount. It is not disclosed to you that we believe there is a much greater volume of material that is already on site. This material was imported in connection with an abandoned proposal to build a much larger reservoir, has been alluded to, covering the entire site. For that, the applicant sought approval to bring in 45,000 cubic meters of material. As a result, truckloads of material were delivered regularly between autumn 18 and autumn 2020. The applicant's failure to acknowledge to the case officer and to yourselves this hugely greater amount of imported material, much more than 11,900 cubic meters, is, with no pun intended, a material omission. You do not need to take our word for the amount of material. We refer you to the existing site plan, which was posted up, supplied by the applicant's surveyor. This maps out where the site is currently higher than the land's natural elevation of 150 meters, where material has been dumped. Local observation reveals any flat areas remaining have all been raised by at least half a meter above their natural level. We estimate that this alone involves at least 6,000 cubic meters of added material. If you then look at the heights recorded for the large mound extending along the site's western side, figures given show the added height as variously 4 meters, 3, 2 meters above the natural level of 150. This mound occupies a third of the 2.7 hectare site. If we take an average, we can see that this embankment alone consists of at least 20,000 cubic meters of imported material, and that's before adding all the material dumped on the rest of the site. Overall, we estimate that a minimum of 30,000 cubic meters of material has been brought in, and actually almost certainly more. I know that councillors and planners will not want to legitimise the movement of large amounts of inert material onto a beautiful natural site, except for a properly authorised activity. We say that the applicant has failed to demonstrate that the large amount of material brought to the site is needed to create this reservoir. Nor can you be assured that proposed landscaping will absorb surplus material. You're told that the area not occupied by the reservoir will be levelled with the natural elevation of the land. That is good. But that can't be done while retaining thousands of tons of surplus imported material beyond the 11,900 needed. Logically then, all surplus material should be removed. This will fulfil planning policy's aim of protecting the natural environment. To conclude, first, we believe you should not approve the retention of 5,500 or 11,900 or the whole 30,000 cubic meters of material imported without knowing what will happen to all of it. As only a third of it will be used for the reservoir, the rest should be removed. If contrary to our submission, you grant permission, we ask you to impose a condition that some 20,000 cubic meters of material, or whatever the volume truly is, which has been brought onto the site in excess of what is required for this reservoir, should be removed. Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Any points of clarification from members? For Councillor Langley. No? Councillor Daniel Allen.
Hello. Under point 5, your wording is local observations reveal any flat areas remaining have been raised by half a metre above their natural level. What is local observation, please?
Local observation, sir, is people who are familiar with the site as it was before it was defaced by the addition of material over the 2-year period. And the simplest measurement to take on a flat area where one can see how a field level has been elevated consistently across. For the calculation of the material in the mounds, we rely on the figures supplied by the surveyor. So local observation is certainly lay observation.
Thank you. Any other questions or clarification? Have you got another question?
Follow-up question, yes. Overall, you estimate, so you haven't, as you've said previously in your answer, got anyone qualified to give us that information. Do you have anybody qualified that gives you the 30,000 cubic meters?
No, we are parish councillors obliged to turn our hand to the necessities of the circumstances and questions that people bring before us. And so we do a simple calculation based on the information on that sheet. We also know, I mean, I suppose we are informed by the fact that this planning authority quite correctly supplied a certificate of lawfulness to authorise the applicant to import 45,000 cubic meters of material for a permitted development engineering works for the 25,000 cubic meter reservoir. And we observed the transformation of that on site. If you ask me as a layperson, I'm not a quantity surveyor and I can't measure soil. What I do know is that if the amount on site constitutes a third of the 45,000 cubic meters that would have been required to build the larger reservoir, then the field would have been elevated to the level of the woods surrounding it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Langley. Can now go to member advocate objecting, Councillor Gerald Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Site history. As the officer mentions in the report, there was an earlier application for a reservoir. Reed and Berkway parish councils and many others realised very early on that this was primarily a material transfer commercial enterprise and not the construction of a reservoir. In 2019, on 2 occasions, I met the owner of the company who carried out the work, and he confirmed to me that it was a material transfer activity. The original reservoir was never built, and this one, if built, can never be usefully filled by rainwater alone without the applicant applying for a water abstraction license. Without a license, the landowner can legally only abstract water at 20 cubic meters per day. Therefore, if it rained every day, it would take 275 days to fill, assuming no evaporation and or irrigation. Licensed water abstraction here would be at the expense of water flowing east to the local village ponds and streams. The Environment Agency have already pointed out to everybody, including the applicant, that an abstraction license is unlikely to be granted and has not been requested by the applicant. It appears that the applicant now has a problem because the Environment Agency says they are waiting for Savills to respond to our concerns about whether the reservoir can actually be filled before exploring the possibility of any enforcement action in relation to the lawful development certificate. Having not originally built a reservoir, the Environment Agency and our council understandably want what now looks like a Martian landscape problem resolved. It seems that the applicant can either remove the thousands of square meters of dumped material or try and construct a reservoir, which the Environment Agency confirms can never be filled naturally with rainwater without an abstraction license, which the Environment Agency say is unlikely because it is a sensitive location at the peak of a chalk aquifer. The applicant says that the reservoir will be filled from local ditches. The Environment Agency says, and I quote, "These local ditches are likely to have minimal flows outside rainfall events and could be dry for long periods. The reservoir location is an area where the issue of a license is heavily restricted. The local abstraction policy and limited flows is not likely to offer a reliable source of licensable water." I note that we've now got the information as to where the how the water is going to come from the roof of the buildings with mobile pumps. So when it rains, they're going to run around switching on mobile pumps. Whilst I note that the officer says that the Environment Agency has no objection, the 1.5 lines of comment in the report do not exactly do justice to the Environment Agency's letters that I've handed to the committee. Even if the applicant constructs something resembling a reservoir to circumvent possible enforcement, this must include far more detail and a timescale for landscaping that will be carried out with the remaining thousands of square meters of surplus site material. Also, the applicant needs to confirm that this structure will not be filled with anything but natural water. The applicant says they will not import any more material. However, there is no clay on site, which the applicant says they will use to line the reservoir, nor is there any topsoil to landscape, only chalk, which is not suitable for either. I trust that the officers and committee members have all been to have a look at this environmental mess. As I said, the area resembles a Martian's landscape. Finally, have Hertford County Council Ecology been consulted? There's a Bridle Way public right-of-way, BR9 adjacent. Has Hertfordshire County Council rights of way been consulted? And the British Horse Society, have they been consulted? We've been nagging for years about this abuse of the planning system, and this is where we find ourselves today. Please refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Do we have any questions or clarification from members? For Councillor Morris. Councillor Tony Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. There's quite a contradiction here, isn't there? And I think probably our officer should be the one to come back to make some remarks against the Environmental Agency, the clay. There's a number of issues because in the report it says totally the opposite. There's no objection. There's clay there to do it. And I've been up there and all I can see is chalk, but I haven't dug all the land around. If there could be a clay deposit
Councillor
underneath
Hunter,
it.
what is your question?
My question is, can our
clarification?
officer confirm back when there's an opportunity?
Thank you. Any more questions from councillors? Clarification. Okay, Anne, would you like to respond?
Obviously, I've been back to the agents during the, these questions were raised during the consultation phase, and I've put the questions back and set out in the report are their answers. And they are, obviously got a different point of view to Ken Langley and Councillor Morris. One believes one believes the other. I'm not a quantity surveyor. I obviously can't go to site and measure it myself. I have to take on as fact the information provided by the applicant. I'm afraid I can't probably tell you. I want you, I understand, Councillor Hunter, you want me to say which side is correct, but I'm afraid I have to just point to the information in the application.
Could you go on to the questions that were mentioned before about Hertfordshire County Council Ecology? Have they been consulted?
The consultations are set out in the report. I can confirm that the British Horse Society and the Hertfordshire Rights of Way were not consulted because the application doesn't affect any rights of way or bridle paths. The application site doesn't extend over those. Hertfordshire Ecology. Just check the file. Yes, Hertfordshire Ecology were consulted on the 5th of April 2022, and we've not had a response.
Shall we go to debate? Who would like to start?
Got the applicant here or his agent to say a few words.
The agent's unfortunately unwell in hospital, and the applicant was unable to attend.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. I think my question is directed at our officer. And she gave a very fair answer, because obviously you have to take what the applicant's giving you as being correct. And obviously we got totally contradicting statements as far as that's concerned. Looking at it as a planning issue, the actual level of deposits that are there at the moment and the actual level of the land, does that in any way affect this planning application?
Would you like to respond, or Simon? Or woman? Do you know which one is the question?
Sorry, Chair, we're just having a little chat. We're wondering whether or not, I think, first of all, draw members' attention to condition 8, recommended condition 8 on page 26. So what we've got there is that no additional materials to be brought onto site for the construction of this reservoir. Only the imported material already on site can be used. So if you granted planning permission, then we'd have control over any further importation of material that's not already on site through that condition. At the moment, without planning permission, it's a bit of a grey area as to how you control that, because some of this stuff might tip into county matters and some of it's district matters. So there's that condition there. And what you could consider is, as well as that one, plus 7's worth looking at as well. 7 is the one that restricts it to reservoir and no other purpose, to the one above. And you could add another condition, but you'd need to think carefully about it. What you could add another condition to say, upon completion of the reservoir, any additional material on site can be disposed of, taken away, or some scheme of removal. Because I think, are you concerned about what happens to the material that's left after the completion of the reservoir? Was that what you were concerned about?
Yes, that's exactly it, because obviously we can't be 100% certain how much material has been deposited on this site, or we can't prove one way or another. So if you end up with a situation that a percentage of it is used for this new reservoir, and then there's a leveling out, obviously you could end up with a landscape that's going to be much higher and never getting back to the landscape it originally was, which it's been implied that will happen. But you won't be able to do it if there's so much tonnage on the site that it's impossible to do.
Yeah, I understand that. So perhaps what we could do, you could have a condition that deals with this upon completion of the development of the reservoir, within a certain amount of time following completion, reasonable amount of time, a scheme of removal and or profiling of remaining materials or landscape. We could have something along those lines to be submitted and agreed with the local planning authority, so that you then got, so if you did that, you'd have control over the use. You've got condition 7 is restrictive on what we're granting permission for. Condition 8 says you can't import any more material onto site as of the date of this permission, if permission is granted. And then the additional condition could deal with the removal of, or the profiling of, disposal of any excess material that's left following the development. How does that sound?
That sounds a lot more acceptable because we can't doubt the environmental agency, unfortunately. But that does give us some scope to actually put the site back in some sort of presentable order. Quite happy with that, Chairman.
Okay, so I tell you, so what we're looking for is something post development, aren't we? But within a time frame that we've got control of. Maybe prior to the completion of the development, that's it. And the use of the reservoir prior to the completion of development and the first use as a reservoir. A scheme of excess material removal and disposal and mitigation, profiling, something along those lines. That captures it, I think. That means that they can't get away without doing it, and we've got control over when they do it.
Councillor Hunter,
Happy with that, Chairman.
thank you. Daniel Allen.
So, Councillor Hunter, did you just propose?
I didn't actually, but I will propose because I think that's the only way forward planning wise, because otherwise we're in a sort of betwixt and between, unfortunately, as stated by the officer, Mr. Ellis.
Do we have a seconder?
I would like to second the proposal with the condition as suggested by Simon Ellis.
Thank you. We've just got one other councillor waiting to speak, so can we hear that councillor first? Councillor Michael Muir.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask Simon, with that condition, would that stop the farmer moving some of this soil, excess soil, to other parts, other fields that he owns to hire those fields slightly?
Thank you, Chair. I think if the condition which we haven't fully written out is going to require the applicant to submit a scheme to demonstrate what they would do with any excess material upon completion. And then we would have to approve that scheme. And then we would make sure that the scheme for the removal of or disposal of excess material is done sensitively, because that would be our assessment at that point. So it wouldn't be a free-for-all. And I think that, to be honest, I think this is the only way you're going to control this activity, because I can't see an alternative. What's the alternative? We get them to remove everything and take it away again. I think the best thing to do is to grant the permission with these conditions, and then we then control the operation from then on.
As a point of clarification, at the end of the report, and our officer have said that he will probably need planning permission to take the water off the roof of one of his buildings so that he can use that water. So would planning permission be needed for that? Because we've heard from the parish councillor that that could cause lots of problems and eyesore of whatever he has to put in pumping or anything like that.
When I wrote the committee report, the drainage details were lacking, and that's why I put the informative on, stating that it says the applicants advise the drainage works to ensure the collection and transportation of water from the grain store building roof may require planning permission, because I didn't know the details. They've since come in saying they've got an existing drainage network across the farm, and that they have mobile drainage systems that they can use to transport water around. I spoke to the agent yesterday, and she was of the view that they've already got that equipment on the farm. They would just utilise it in an existing way, and she didn't believe that they would need to build anything specific to achieve the purpose of moving the water around. So I think the condition, there's the condition above as well, another condition, I think it's 5, which, so I've just gone too far, start my agenda. Condition 5's in 2 parts, and it talks about part B, talks about the detail of any equipment or machinery that will be used in association with either filling or using the water to be stored in the reservoir and how often this will be used. So under that condition, they actually need to tell us how they think it would be likely. Well, obviously no one knows it's going to rain really, but I guess that was just as a cover all for that. So from what I understand now, I don't believe that they will need specific planning permission to put in a pumping system. So I think they've already got that on site.
So we have a proposer, we have a seconder. Shall we go to the vote? Abby, could go to the vote, please?
Chair, this motion is carried.
Item 7. Item 7 is 22/01657, the Rose Gardens, Cambridge Road, Hitchin, Hertfordshire. Erection of external canopy following removal of existing marquee. And Matt Dunn to present, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one update, which is the addition of condition 4, which states that prior to the erection of the canopy hereby approved, the marquee is to be dismantled and removed from the site. First slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide, please. Sorry. Thank you. This is a full application for a small section of canopy roof to sit alongside the main pathway from the car park to the main building, which is already covered by the canopy. So on this plan, it's the red box basically where the canopy roof is proposed to go. Next slide, please. So as set out in the report, 2 recent permissions have been granted for limited infilling at the garden centre. These are the blue and green areas on the plan. The proposed canopy before you tonight in this application is the purple area. Next slide, please. This plan shows the canopy structure, which is open. So the top elevations of this side view. The next elevation down is the view from the car park. And you obviously see it's the same height as the canopy for the car park. Next slide, please. This shows the roof layout. Next slide, please. So this is obviously a photo taken from the car park looking towards the main entrance, and it's the side of the marquee. So next slide, please. So it's actually going to be going in roughly in the gap between the marquee and the existing canopy. As set out in the report, the NPPF allows for small infill development that does not result in the outward extension into the greenbelt. As the canopy is to be set in front of the existing building and is significantly shallow in footprint width, there's, in my view, an outward expansion of the greenbelt, and this application is recommended for approval on that basis. The marquee is an unauthorised structure and obviously is to go. The existing, the proposed canopy is the same height as the existing canopy. So in sort of height terms, it's lower than the marquee and in effect will result in openness on the site. The application has been called in for committee for determination by Councillor Dennis Harburg, and the application is recommended for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from members? Clarification? No, sorry. Questions from members? No? Okay, we'll go on to the registered speakers. First speaker is Objector Mark Whitby.
Thank you, Councillor. I represent a group of neighbours, 5 neighbours who live immediately opposite the garden centre and have lived in Hitchin for the last 17, 18 years, during which time we've watched a slow intensification of the use of the garden centre, and particularly had good relationships with planners and seen that 2 applications have gone to appeal and been refused. What we're seeing, unfortunately, with these new owners is a further intensification of the garden centre and the use of the garden centre. This is the 4th of 5 applications we're considering today, which have been made since March 21. The first 2 being made during lockdown, when we were not informed of the works and were carried or passed by the council, by the planning committee or planning planners on delegated powers, despite the fact that they created a 65% increase in area on the site. covered areas on the site. These areas, which were formerly used for the display of plants and pots and other normal garden materials, are now dedicated to what I would call less garden appropriate items, such as hot tubs and teddy bears. That's being a bit mean, but nonetheless, that's what's happening. It represents a serious commercial intensification of the site, which is clearly creating a spread from the site out into the car park, as you saw in those pictures, where you had the plant pots and bagged materials occupying what is existing car parking space. With the result, as we are going to hear in application number 5, of the car park spilling out onto the adjacent field, which again is going to be a subject of an interesting debate. As a result of this intensification, sales areas and existing plant sales, particularly bagged materials and pots, as I said, have gone outside, and it's spilling out into the adjacent fields. Why we're objecting is it just further intensification of the site, further covered areas, and this is an incremental creep. We would really encourage the owners of this site to come forward with a master plan for the site, rather than a series of just incremental applications. The impact of this growth of in use of the site on us is significant. We have increased traffic as a result of it, and as a result of that, we have problems exiting our driveway because the road layout is inadequate from ours to theirs, if you wish to visit. And not only that, we're seeing the spread into the greenbelt and a compromise of the greenbelt. This is not an ordinary site. This is a greenbelt site. And as I wrote in my notes, which were prepared with the help of a professional, so you'll see I'm not one here, it's nowhere is this sort of retail use, of incremental increase in retail use, and allowed within the greenbelt as a sort of how do they put it, NPPF. So we're seeing, what we're seeing is this sort of creep. And then an example of this creep is exactly this marquee which was erected. Having covered having enclosed the plant sales areas which were previously covered, immediately spring arrived. They come in with a whole lot of plants. Of course, plants are very vulnerable to frost at that time of the year, and erect a marquee illegally on the site without any permission. Now, maybe a marquee for a week is fine, maybe a marquee for a month is fine, but it demonstrates inappropriate use of the previous areas they were using for display of plants. And our argument is they don't need this extension. They could quite easily use the existing areas they've got for the sales of plants and just revert to a normal garden centre as opposed to this hodgepodge that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any points of clarification from members? No. So can we go on to speaker in support, David Lazenby?
Thank you, Chair, members, and good evening. My name's David Lazenby. I'm the applicant, and I also work at the Garden Centre company that owns Hitchin Garden Centre. I also previously worked at Wyvale Garden Centres, which sold Hitchin to British Garden Centres. So I've worked and known the Garden Centre for about 7 or 8 years now. This is a relatively minor addition to the Garden Centre, but it will make a significant improvement to the operation of the Garden Centre and the enjoyment of our visitors and customers. The reason for the application is to, plant protection. In the cold months, you need frost protection, and obviously then when it gets hotter, the bright sunlight also damages and obviously means extra watering. So it is purely for that. And these structures are commonplace and accepted in garden centres, including those designated as Greenbelt. We have about 30 garden centres in the Greenbelt, and all of them have these type of structures, and it is perfectly acceptable for them to be there. So some concerns raised by the residents we've just heard, and I thought it was quite well summarised and eloquently put by Councillor Dennis Harburg. So I thought I'd just go through a few of those points and try and address them. So there's quite a bit of mention of past conduct to the business. And obviously there are various items that are going in the car park. This is generally for customers to help them purchase things. So rather than going into the garden centre buying bags of compost and then travelling all the way through the centre, having them in the car park where they're paid for at the tills and then pick them up as they leave straight into their cars is generally a customer benefit. It is something that we can look at if the residents truly are concerned by this, but yeah, I don't think it forms part of this application. The use of the canopy and the products in this space that we might end up selling teddy bears, hot tubs, various other giftware. If you go there now and you look at the marquee and you see what we are selling, we're selling plants. And that is what the intention is of the canopy, is to have a place for plants to be able to grow and live and be watered. So we have no intentions of putting anything other than plants underneath it. In terms of the constant expansion and the harm to natural environment, there has been 4 applications to date. This 4th one is because the 3rd one unfortunately got refused. And that was for a much bigger scheme of canopies and plant area that went throughout the external plant area. But we've obviously looked at it again and made a more modest application. There's been no applications on greenfield sites. It's all been on the hard area. So there should be no harm to the natural environment at all. As mentioned about transition from plant-based garden services, gift furniture. As I say, I've known the site for 8 years and it's always sold things like gifts, other complementary goods. This company has a much bigger emphasis on plants, house plants, as well as Christmas. We do like a lot of theatre about Christmas. So if you do go there, it will be quite a good shopping experience. There's mention about highway safety as well. Actually, I think the highway access at this site is exceptionally good. It's a separate access and a separate egress point. So it does reduce conflicts quite a bit. We do have other users on the site, the nursery at the back and the caravan storage, but actually it works exceptionally well. The site is well loved by lots of people. The overflow car park that's mentioned is been there and been used for many years, and it has not been intensified over their time. Hopefully you're able to support the application and the continued growth in the garden centre, and happy to answer any questions. And thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, clarification from members? Councillor Amy Allen.
Could I just confirm that this canopy is replacing a current canopy? Is that what I read correct? It's actually over the land. And marquee.
So the canopy will go where partially the marquee is. It's not as big, it's about half the size. So it'll go, as you walk into the garden centre, there's like an entrance walkway and it'll be attached to that and it'll go across to about halfway into the marquee. So it will be smaller and the marquee will be removed.
Thank you. Any other questions or clarification? So can I return to Anne, please, to respond to any points made?
I've got nothing to add, thank you.
So shall we go to the debate? Who would like to speak first? Councillor Daniel Allen.
I can see no legal reason to say no to this. I can see no planning reason to say no to this. I'm surprised that it's been brought before us. I'm glad that we do have the opportunity to call things in, but I see no problem with this and I would propose that we grant this.
Councillor Michael Muir.
Yes, I confirm that I'm of the same thoughts as Daniel, but I do want to ask one question. This is an erection of an external canopy following the removal of the existing marquee. Now, if we pass this, could we have a condition that no other marquee is erected at all? Is that possible?
I don't see why not. I mean, obviously, the condition that I'm adding on, I mentioned first of all, ask for the marquee to be dismantled and removed from the site. If any other kind of marquee were to be erected, there's obviously temporary use, temporary rights for people. They would still apply, so they can still have a marquee up within 28 days in any calendar year without needing planning permission. The sort of point comes if it's there for longer than 28 days, and obviously enforcement action comes in again. So I'm not sure we could impose a condition stating that when there's obviously permitted development rights that apply to the site in the first place.
That's okay. Councillor Tony Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman. My question was to the officer on 434. it almost implies that the overflow parking area is subject to our enforcement team. Is that because it was stated that it's been used for a great number of years as an overflow?
There is no open enforcement case regarding the car parking area. I believe an application has been submitted this week for the consideration of that, and on the planning side, it's with my colleague Alex Howard, and I obviously can't comment on it because it's in the early days if it's just been submitted.
Any further comments? Councillor McAbey.
Can I say that if Daniel Allen is going to propose this, I would like to second it.
Propose it.
I did.
Get you change your mind. And are you going to do the seconder? So a proposer and a seconder. Shall we go to the vote, please, Abby?
Chair, this motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 8, 22/01448, land at Turnpike Lane. Sorry?
I know it's only been an hour, but can we call a bathroom break? Please.
Yes, yes, no problem. So now 8:26, should we come back for 8:35? Thank you. Welcome back. Item 8, 22/01448, land at Turnpike Lane, adjacent to 4 Manor Close, Turnpike Lane, Ickleford. This is the erection of 5 dwelling houses in association with a new access spur from the Lodge Court, on-site parking, landscaping, inclusive new trees, formation of a pedestrian footpath, and designation of communal open space. Revised application following approvals of 20/00891 and 21/03464. Amended plans received on 5th of September 2022. And MacDonald to present, please.
Thank you. First slide, please. No. Faster. Oh, that's it. Thank you. No, next slide, please. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you. This is a full application for 5 detached houses. Members will be familiar with this site, which is on the edge of the village of Ickleford. The purple buildings, which you can see kind of towards the northern side of the site, are listed buildings, and along the front of the site, there's a TPO, and the trees are protected. Next slide, please. This shows an aerial view of the site. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site layout plan. Members will remember that a 5-house scheme was approved at appeal and then amended to allow roof accommodation under a Section 73 approval. This proposal follows the layout of these extant permissions. The houses, open space and visitor parking are all in the same locations. The houses in plots 1 to 4 have the same ridge height as approved under the Section 73 approval, and the house in plot 5 is lower. The side flank of the plot 5 is the same distance away from the neighbour as the extant scheme. These houses have got larger footprints and are of a contemporary design. In pure numbers terms, the proposal represents an increase in the size of the footprints in comparison to the Section 73 permission of 61% across all 5 plots, as most houses have increased in footprint by 1.5 to 2 metres or 1.5 to 0.5 to 1 metres in width. However, this is meaningless in my view, as the ridge height of the houses is not being increased. The house in plot 5 is no closer to the neighbour at number 4 Manor Close, and the side flank wall facing that neighbour is 0.8 metres deeper, which is not a material change. Good sized gardens in excess of the minimum standards and ample parking in excess of the parking SPD are all proposed. As a result, the increase in the footprints does not represent any harm or a reason to refuse the scheme for. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, the plan showing the front elevations of plots 1 to 4 was not loaded, and I asked for that plan to be emailed around to you all today. This plan shows the elevation design for the house in plot 5, with the front elevations of the houses in plots 3 and 4 shown in full, and partly, plot 2 is partly visible. The design of these houses is more contemporary than the approved schemes, with larger sections of glazing. There's no objection to this. The houses are set in from the road, and the existing and proposed trees will screen views and give the development an attractive setting. The open space and trees in the northwest corner of the site will provide space and setting to the neighbours. The proposal represents attractive placemaking in my view. As there's no increased harm, in my view, proposed by this application, it's recommended for conditional permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions from members? No. Can we then go on to register speakers? First of all, to object, Kate Sargent.
Hello. Hi there. I'm here again today representing residents of Manor Close and Lodge Court. As I have limited time, I'm not going to spend it going over the many planning concerns associated with this development that have been repeatedly raised by large numbers of local residents. concerns that relate to the additional traffic and pedestrian risk that it would generate, to the ecological devastation of an area that is home to a wide variety of species, to its proximity to a conservation and heritage area, to the very significant detrimental impact that it will have on parking in Lodge Court, to the fact that this development remains outside the emerging local plan, which has yet to be approved, to the additional pressure on the village's sewerage system, and to the loss of privacy and light that residents of Manor Close will be forced to accept. We will be raising with the Ombudsman the repeated failure of the District Council to appropriately recognise or address these concerns, but today I'm going to talk about need. An earlier iteration of this development was approved on appeal by the planning inspector when it consisted of 2 two-bed properties, 2 3-bed properties and 1 4-bed property, for the sole reason that it was believed to meet a local need for housing that constituted the very special circumstances for building on the Green Belt. This was in spite of the development not being proposed in the emerging local plan, which only recommends a redesignation of the land to white land, which is land without any specific proposal for allocation in a development plan, where it is intended that for the most part, existing uses shall remain undisturbed and unaltered. 3 iterations on, this development proposal now constitutes 3 5-bed and 2 4-bed houses. I would invite the committee to consider the results of the August 2021 Ickleford Housing Needs Assessment, which states that the most significant finding is the need for affordable home ownership in Ickleford. Starting prices for 4-bed detached houses in Hitchin are now £700,000, and prices for 4 to 5-bed houses in the local area stretch well into the £1 million territory, hardly what could be described as affordable. The same assessment demonstrates that in Ickleford, an appropriate response to the need would be to prioritise the supply of smaller to mid-sized dwellings of 1, 2 and 3 bedrooms. In fact, it is this assessment that has given rise to policy SD2 in the emerging Ickleford neighbourhood plan that states that on all developments of 3 or more dwellings, including the allocated sites in the emerging North Hertfordshire local plan, the sizes of dwellings should be mixed, with at least 34% of smaller, less expensive homes from 1 to 2 bedrooms to enable younger people and older people wishing to downsize to access appropriate housing. At least 50% should be 3-bedroom dwellings, unless there is local up-to-date evidence that larger dwellings are needed. We can only speculate why these latest plans weren't submitted for approval in the first instance, but they are now a country mile from those approved by the inspector, representing as they do a 71% increase in bedrooms, and can no longer be considered to meet the need for which they were granted a Greenbelt exception. On behalf of a large number of Ickleford residents, I therefore once again strongly request that you reject these proposals, and in fact any that do not represent those that were approved by the planning inspector, so that if necessary, they can be reconsidered by them. We ask that you choose need over greed and make the decision that is best for our environment, our precious heritage, and for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification for members for Kate? So member advocates, Councillor North is not here, is he, at the moment? So can I go back to Anne MacDonald to respond to the points raised?
Sorry. I'd say, well, the only point I'd make is the Ickleford neighbourhood plan is not a made plan, therefore it holds no weight in decision making tonight or in consideration of the application. And the Section 73 application is the application that I was referring to in terms of comparison of the floor space, because obviously the scheme that's allowed to appeal has already been moved on once already on this Section 73, where additional bedrooms were already allowed. So other than those 2 points of clarification, I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
Shall we go to debate? Who would like to speak first? Councillor Nigel Mason.
Thank you. I'm slightly perturbed by this. Perhaps I don't understand the background fully. So having won an appeal, they then decided to go for larger houses, which I'm curious. Do we have any insight as to why that is? Any reason been given? Because in terms of need, as been pointed out, I think there's a greater need for probably 3-bedroom houses than there is for 5-bedroom houses in the area. So I'm just slightly perturbed as to why having won an appeal is now being upsized, as it were, and where that leaves us in terms of what cognizance we can take of that.
Well, the developer isn't here this evening.
Are you happy for me to answer that? The upsizing happened at the section 73. So the appeal was granted, and obviously it was granted appeal. Following that appeal, there was a second application where consent was granted to allow accommodation in the roofs. So at that point, all the houses upsized into more bedrooms at that point in time. The site's been sold. If there's a new developer, they're now wishing to come in, obviously, with their own design of house. But in terms of a sort of planning point of view, there's no policy reason to not allow an additional bedrooms on the houses. It's a small scheme. The sort of mixed policies don't tend to bite more until you have more houses. And the numbers of bedrooms are not really different compared to the standard permission on the site already. Yes, the houses are larger, but the numbers of bedrooms are not significantly increasing.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you. I remember I was sitting on the committee when we refused this one the first time around, and in all honesty, we felt it was inappropriate development on the Greenbelt. Now that argument has been totally taken away from us, and that's very evident by the appeal decision. So unfortunately, as much as I would like to put a case to actually refuse it, I think everything that our officer has told us and in the report and the inspector's actual decision has actually taken that away from us. So I will propose we go with our officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Can I just go to Councillor Muir twice for a second?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say the same thing along the lines that Councillor Tony Hunter has just said. I don't think we've got any grounds to refuse this on planning grounds. We might want to refuse it on what the parish council wants for lower cost housing. But if we do that, they'll go to appeal and we will lose it. Okay, we don't accept planning just because we might have costs of £100,000, £120,000 against a refusal. But I will certainly second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, just to confirm, the Section 73 application was approved by us.
It was.
Yeah, so we and that was the upsizing
It was.
initially. So we can hardly go back on that and then say this slight redesign is something that we can't approve, having already approved the Section 73 application. So I mean, it doesn't make sense to my mind how we could do that, much as I find it distasteful the way that some of these things are progressed by various developers, and you end up with something that you didn't really intend to approve in the first place. But as it's been pointed out, we did initially not want this to go ahead and lost the appeal. I looked at the appeal decision. I couldn't see any reference to the housing mix in that, but I may have missed it. But as I said, I think we can't go back and say the houses these shouldn't be allowed when we previously allowed the larger versions in the Section 73.
So what is done on that, isn't it? So have we got a proposal from Councillor Hunter? And we have a seconder from Councillor Muir. Shall we go to the vote, please, Abby?
Chair, this motion is carried.
Thank you. Now go on to item 9, which is 22/01173, 131 London Road, Nebworth. Change of use and conversion of existing first floor retail unit to 1 2-bed flat. Oh, sorry. Is it? Are we on the last one or this one? Carry on.
Sorry, Chair. Well, I did press my button in time, but you were in full
I
flow.
was, yeah, I was vibing.
It's just the reason for referral to committee. Now, maybe I'm old school, but I used to be hammered by Mary Caldwell and others to give a reason. And I know at previous meetings we have asked for councillors to come to a meeting when it's referred, but I would be shocked if you were minded to grant permission to this, but in the event you are, I would like it called in. I mean, I don't think that's an adequate planning reason to actually pull something into committee. And I think it ought to be dealt with by your good self and the administration that if we keep this up, you'll end up with committee meetings where we'll be sitting here all night because councillors don't like it.
To Ickleford. Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, and then no show. Yes. I will take that as well.
Item 8 and reason for referral to committee. To my way of thinking, that is not a reason.
I think add to that. If a councillor calls it in, I feel it's their duty bound to attend the committee to give their reasons why. And if a councillor calls it in and they're not willing to come, then it should be taken off the agenda and delegated powers. Thank you.
Councillor Daniel Allen, is it about the same thing?
It is about the same thing. Just also to point out, this isn't the first time that councillor has done this, and it really isn't acceptable. And I want it to be noted that this is across the board that we're saying this, not just one party.
Thank you. Can we note that, please, Newetta, to take that forward? Thank you. Am I safe to go on to item 9 now? Thank you. Thomas Howe to present, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Please can I have the slides? Thank you. And the next slide, please. So this is the GIS map showing the plot. It is a first floor unit within the Nebworth, London Road High Street area, designated as a local centre in the emerging local plan and as a retail area in the Nebworth neighbourhood plan. I have 2 updates for the application. In my principal development section, I should have referenced policy KBL3 from the Nebworth neighbourhood plan. However, I would still support that, well, I'd still say that the principal development is supported as it's not the loss of retail space and it's not the loss of a service, which would be, say, within Class E, as the unit was most recently in use as a sui generis tattoo studio. Please can the next slide. And again, please. So this is a street view image showing the principal elevation as seen from London Road. The purple sign is relating to the tattoo studio and was in situ when I made my site visit, which can be seen in the next photo. Thank you. And this is on the left is the stair access to the first floor, area, the flat that is proposed. And next slide, please. This is a rear elevation. It's rather difficult to fully see the rear elevation. However, this is the existing WC window, which you'll see on the floor plans coming up soon. Next slide, please. So yes, that's the WC you see on the bottom right. The proposed floor plan is not in my slides. However, the flat would basically be laid out as 2 bedrooms to that right side, the two upper offices, and a large dining and living room and kitchen area to that large office space to the left, and the store. An ensuite and other bathroom would be within the existing kitchen area. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. I would suggest that, as I say, given that this is change of use from a sui generis, actually, sorry, I'll take a step back. I forgot to do 2 other updates. There is on my report, the site history, an application which I say is pending, which is the change of use from the tattoo parlor to a massage parlor. This was granted conditional permission on the 4th of October. And as I say, whilst the description of development does relate to retail use, it is in fact, yes, sui generis as a tattoo parlor. The flats would benefit from large internal areas exceeding the space standards set nationally, with built-in storage at both first floor level and within the stairwell. It would benefit from various amenities within the high street, such as shops, leisure, employment opportunities, and transport links through buses and the railway in walking distance. And whilst there's no parking provided, I would suggest that this is a sustainable location that does not necessarily require a vehicle. And also the surrounding area does benefit from various retail uses within the Class E use class. And yes, that's my my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Any questions from members of Thomas? Councillor Muir?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I ask the planning officer, how long has the upstairs been empty, and what has happened as far as trying to find a new tenant other than a business tenant, other than residential? So has this property been properly investigated for another business?
When looking at, say, Street View, it would suggest that it was in use as the tattoo parlor in April of last year. However, I did not receive any information, say, about when it was vacated and whether it was unviable to continue in a business use. So I did not receive that, no.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson?
I'm a bit unclear about the sequence of events. When you were talking about the conditional permission for a change of use from a tattoo parlor to a massage parlor on the 4th of October, and now they want to apply. That's different.
Applicants.
Can someone explain that to me?
It's different applicants.
Okay. Concurrently.
Yes.
Other side.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I was just going to say, so the application you're looking at now is 22-01173 for planning permission, and the one regarding the change from a tattoo to the the massage would be, it's a different application. If you look at the site history 1.1, that's a different application altogether. So I think you've got two different applications. But the one we're considering today is the one regarding the change to residential use.
Any other questions for, continue? It's gone now. Any other questions for Thomas? Okay, we'll go to the registered speakers. Objector Claire Graham.
Oh, it's working. Sorry. Hello. I'm objecting to this application on behalf of Nebworth Parish Council due to the lack of parking provision required by parking policy and impact on local business. This property is part of the local centre, which being a village is quite small. The property was a tanning salon prior to being a tattoo parlour and has recently received planning approval to become a massage parlour. Loss of business premises, regardless of category, will have a negative impact on the vitality of the village centre because business brings in potential customers for other shops. In recent years, two pharmacies, a betting shop, builder's merchant and bank have all been lost from the high street. The builder's merchant has been replaced by 47 assisted living flats and 3 small empty retail units. This has sterilised a large part of the high street. The development at 137 London Road, previously a sand yard, is currently under construction and will have a retail unit plus 4 flats with only 3 parking spaces, another under provision. Nebworth has serious parking and traffic problems with many streets used as unofficial car parks by rail commuters. It also has one of the highest car ownership statistics for the district. The officers suggest that the North Hearts parking policy can be ignored because there is on-street parking available within a 4-minute walk. This may appear true on paper, but not in reality. The majority of roads in the vicinity have some form of restriction, being it 1-hour parking, controlled parking zones, or double yellow lines. The few roads with long-term parking are already fully occupied. There is no surplus parking provision within walking distance. And why should people who have purchased property with off-street parking have their roads consigned to be in a car park because North Hearts planning ignores its own policy? Hearts County Council is currently consulting on North Hearts LC WIP, which proposes a segregated cycleway along the B197 and Station Road. This would remove all on-street parking on Stevenage Road, London Road and Station Road, which will put added pressure to on-street parking because no alternative provision is proposed. The officer's report states that the proximity of transport nodes alongside shopping, leisure and employment opportunities overcome the shortfall of parking provision. The proximity of a bus stop does not negate the parking provision shortfall. The proximity of shops to the site do not prevent people owning a vehicle or necessarily mean that they will use the shops. This is evidenced by the number of Tesco, Sainsbury and other delivery vans outside Low House. Just because you live close to shops does not mean you use them. The local plan has not identified any employment area in Nebworth, and larger employers within the village have sold up and their sites redeveloped for housing, mainly in the form of flats. So I'm not sure what the employment opportunities are available. The waste response requires space for the bin lorry to stop and collect, so parking restrictions may be required. This means a loss of parking space on the high street. 2 parking spaces have already been lost on the high street with the development of Low House, and another probably with the development of 137 London Road. The loss of parking spaces on the high street has a negative impact on the vitality of the village centre. This was witnessed when Hearts County Council imposed its COVID town measures on Nebworth Village. The loss of all parking provision along the high street resulted in a huge slump in trade for all shops. The change of use and lack of parking provision for this site will have an impact on the vitality of the high street and put pressure on parking spaces around the village. To permit buildings to be converted without at least one off-road parking space per dwelling is contrary to North Hearts parking policy and results in Nebworth being one large car park. Nebworth Parish Council therefore requests that you apply your policies and refuse this application. Thank you.
Points of clarification for Kate?
I have nothing further to add, but
I've just got Thomas. I've got one. I've got another speaker yet. So you may have by then. Can I go on to a member advocate objecting, Councillor Lisa Nash?
As member advocate, I wish to object to this proposal on the grounds that it impacts on the neighbouring area in a variety of ways, including the removal of an economic opportunity, a lack of parking provision, and an already large number of empty flats in the area. Interestingly, the reduced economical opportunities for the village also coincide with an excess number of empty flats. In recent years, places of employment such as Hamilton's Billiards and Chaslow's have been made way for empty flats. We have also lost the bank, which has become a church. There are very few employment opportunities within the village, with no room for economic growth. The majority of working age villagers have to travel outside the village for employment, as do I. This application came in during April, and you will see that we still have a huge number of empty flats within the village, with 22, don't know what's going on with the sound, with 22 two-bed flats out of 47 unoccupied for older people at Chaslow, 11 two-bed and one bed, that's 12 out of 12 flats at Park Lane Court unoccupied, Station House and many other flats unoccupied within the village. And they're just a few examples. We do not have a need for flats in the village, and we need to remember that Nebworth is a village which serves a rural community. What we do have a need for is economic growth. This application is another erosion of the opportunity for this to happen, which, if this plan is approved, would be lost forever. With the conception of Chaslow House, we have lost the lion's share of one side of the high street that had previously been used as businesses. That's half a hectare of space for employment opportunities. Indeed, the local cycling infrastructure plan indicates that there is no employment in Nebworth as it is so scarce. Contrary to the officer's report, the village has limited entertainment venues with one medium-sized pub, 2 small cafes which are only licensed to operate during the day, the Royal British Legion and 1 Indian restaurant. The Petonk piece has gone, making way for flats. For a population of 4,496 in the 2011 census, there is very little entertainment, and residents report needing to travel to nearby towns for leisure purposes. Contrary to the officer's report, at best, Nebworth has very poor travel and transport links. Nebworth is the nearest railway station for the residents in nearby Codicott, Potters Heath, Knupp End, Rabley Heath, Walmer Green, Bradbury End, Datchworth and their environs. With our rural neighbours having to drive to the railway station, there are huge parking issues within the village as there are no other alternative safe transport provision available for them. Nebworth not only provides the railway station for these outlying residents, but other shops and services for them to use. These reasons also impact on the very restricted parking issues within the village, which NHDC are well aware of, and there are no long-term car parks within Nebworth. It is well known that commuters park on the streets in order to use the train, of which there are now only 2 slow trains an hour. This proposal also erodes the parking provision in the village. The parking policy has been adopted by the organisation that is NHDC. So therefore, I imagine that it's policy rather than a guideline. And yet this proposal flies in the face of this parking policy. It is in direct conflict with it, suggesting that a 2-bedroom flat can go ahead without any parking provision. We know from the RAC 2021 report that people are dependent on their cars more now than ever since the pandemic. And as you have heard from me, a resident of Nebworth, there are inherent difficulties with transport and travel for the village. No one would be able to let a 2-bedroom flat on the basis that the owner must not have a car. The suggestion is ludicrous and discriminatory. And as you have heard, most of us need to have a car. Nebworth has one of the highest car ownership levels in North Hertfordshire because the transport and travel links are so restricted. This is not the first time that this has happened in developments proposed for Nebworth, and yet the policy that is there to protect everyone is being allowed to be flouted, causing a further erosion of car parking provision in the village. The NPPF 2021 is clear around the issues of economic well-being, and it may well be 1 2-bedroom flat that we are talking about with no car parking instead of a business. But at what point does this erosion of the village stop? You have heard me tell you that there is no opportunity for economic growth within the village, and this erodes that. There are inherent car parking
wind up now,
difficulties.
please?
Yeah, I know, but the volume kept going, didn't it? So I'm literally nearly finished, Val. There are inherent car parking difficulties within the village, and this 2-bedroom flat is being offered with none. And there is a need for, there are no need for 2-bedroom flats, as we already have countless numbers of empty
Stop you
flats which
there,
have been
Lisa.
vacant for many, many months.
Thank you. I've just stopped you there. Thank you. Any questions, clarification for Councillor Nash?
Mention repeatedly the many unoccupied flats, which is definitely true. How about unoccupied retail units? Are there many in the village? I genuinely am not sure on this.
There are some at present, yes, but there's no advertising for many of them. The ones that are associated with Chaslow House, there has been no advertising at all. And as the enforcement officer told me, you can't force people to put up advertising to rent out their properties.
Any other comments, clarification? Thomas, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So with regards to that final point, during my site visits, the unit directly below the flat was vacant. I believe it was a Lloyd's Pharmacy, according to Street View. With regards to the matter of the loss of retail and the provision of the flat, the policies do state, for example, for ETC 6, which is emerging for a local centre, it refers to the use of A1 and other Class E, now be Class E uses at ground floor level. And of course, this is at first floor level. So I would suggest, as in my report, I suggested that this was not, well, there was no objection on that ground. But I acknowledge the comments made regarding, say, the parking. However, on balance, there was consideration that the close transport links would reduce the need for access to a private vehicle for the residents within the flat. And it's not necessarily just, yeah, it is on balance considered to be okay. Just checking the notes. But yes, as I say, I would suggest that given that there's those other, say, shops and other uses nearby, there's not as much of a need for access to a private vehicle. Yeah, I have nothing further to add.
Thank you, Thomas. Shall we go to debate? Who'd like to start? Can I just clarify that the separate planning application for use as a massage parlour was given conditional permission on the 5th of October, a different applicant? Councillor Muir.
We've heard a lot from the local councillor of how many flats are empty in Nebworth. But can we refuse this application because there's a surplus of empty flats? And can we refuse this on planning grounds because it's got no parking? I'd like to have that answered, please.
Thank you. Or Simon? Simon?
Okay. I'll have a go. Refuse it on it that there's already empty flats in the village. I don't think that's a sustainable ground for refusal. There's certainly not a policy that says once you've reached a certain number of flats in a village, there shall be no more, or if planning doesn't really work like that. In terms of car parking, I think what's been described as a bit of an ebb and flow of uses in this area. And if it were a massage parlour, that would generate its own need for car parking anyway. So I think you'd really struggle with an argument to say that this one additional flat is the straw that's going to break the camel's back in terms of car parking and congestion in that high street. I don't think that would be sustainable either, because you've got to compare the existing use with the new use, and both of them will generate potentially the need for car parking, and arguably the commercial use could generate more car parking need than the residential, couldn't it? Because you've got customers and people that work there. So I don't think that's a sustainable argument either, I think.
So you can't take part in this debate.
Well, that's my view, Chair.
Thank you.
So, I would just like to add, some of the members who've been here a bit longer than others, and I think Councillor Noor, you have, when we had the application for the squirrel just across the way, and it was changed to residential flats, we refused it on the fact that there wasn't parking on site, and that got overturned when it went to appeal because it was in a sustainable area, as in it was in the town centre.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Unfortunately, while I don't like the fact that it doesn't have parking, we have got previous examples of where we turn things down due to parking before, and it's not an argument that can be backed up. Therefore, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that I propose that we grant this.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Morgan? Yeah, sorry.
Happy for Michael to
All right.
second.
Michael, your turn. Michael, you want to second. So we've got a proposer and a second. Abby can go to the vote, please.
Chair, this motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 10 is planning appeals. Report from the Development and Conservation Manager.
Thank you, Chair. No, I have no updates, but I'll take any questions on appeals.
Any questions on appeals? Can I just take this opportunity to thank Simon, who is leaving us. This is his last planning meeting, possibly. He's leaving at the end of the month. I don't know if he's going to be here or not. So that I take the opportunity to actually thank you for all you've done for us over the years, and that you enjoy yourself in East Cambridgeshire.
Thank you, Chair. I was just actually thinking, I was remembering the time when we used to do planning committee and we used to hang the plans at the back, and we'd be sitting here giggling as they would fall off during the evening. And then we moved to remote committee, which I think you remember a few, don't you, Daniel? Which were absolute nightmare, weren't they, when you were chairing them on Zoom? But I don't know how we got through some of those. I remember we used to WhatsApp each other, didn't we? It was like, what's going on? And that was a bit of a shock. And it was really great to come back to the council chamber. So for the last, how many months we've been back in the council chamber now? But yeah, it's great to be back, and I hope we never have to do virtual committees again. That was an absolute nightmare. But and also just to say that I've really enjoyed always trying to advise you. And I'd like to think I give you enough wriggle room, because I think you do add value to decisions. I'm not one of these planning professionals that thinks just leave it to the experts, we know what we're doing. I think there's lots of added value that you can give as a committee. So I always like to stretch my imagination to give you as much leeway as you possibly can so that you can add value. And I hope that you've recognized that over the years. And also, I've really encouraged my team to come along to planning committee. And for example, Thomas, he's been doing a few now. And I've got lots of colleagues that will come on and look after you over the next few months. And I know Anne's looking forward to coming to committee more often, aren't you, Anne? So, yeah, it's been a great time, and I wish everyone the best for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. At that point, I will end the meeting at 22 minutes past 9.